I grew up in Park and oh, okay. So should I keep it on?
No, you can.
Anyway, went to college out of state, came back, lived in Annapolis for about 15 years. Now I've been in Pasadena about 15 years. I have married and 3 kids, and I work over in Graysonville as a CAD director.
You don't have another person.
She may be late, so I'm not too sure. She sent me an email saying she'd be here. So
I was just happy to have people with
Oh, good. Well,
John Spencer, that was it.
it's a huge area, and there aren't a lot of trails. So that's one area of interest.
Well, I know we have a forum, and so might as well. And I have a motion to accept the agenda as circulated. Anybody, any discussion? I mean, I think we're probably pretty used to this agenda. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, so we go to the agenda. And on the agenda, we've got the previous meeting notes, and they always say draft on them, but they're really going to be, unless we have changes, they're going to be the notes. So is there a motion to adopt the draft notes? Is there a second? Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So they're adopted, and now I think Eric will tell us what we're going to do tonight.
Thank you, Ann. So yeah, tonight, before we get too far into this, just a couple things. But tonight's gonna be more casual. It's gonna be a big conversation. So people online, you may have a little more difficult time than hearing the normal because we're not gonna pass the mic as much, but we do have the center room mic. So if you are here in the room, just try to speak up. But again, this is an SAC working session. This is made for you guys and gals to really get the conversation rolling on what recommendations are going to be for the final plan. And I'll talk more about that in a half a second. But first, so on Friday, I sent an email about the conflict of interest disclosure form. It's a new form that we just received late last week to pass to you all to fill out. I appreciate all of you who have done that already. If you have not, I have copies and I will pass those around. Just please, if you would, please fill those out and return them back to me or Jesse or Lorenzo, or email them back to me at your earliest convenience. So I have those at the table before you leave. Now, yes, I have blank copies. So yeah, but like as Ann was saying, for tonight's meeting, it's just gonna be a big discussion. And tonight we're going to talk about housing and transportation further, because that's what you as the SAC wanted to discuss. A couple months ago, we asked you what would tonight's meeting be based on your interests and what you guys want more conversation of. And overwhelmingly, it was transportation and housing. So let me get in the middle of the room. So essentially what a lot of people, what these plans are going to incorporate with is everybody knows that these plans are going to be the zoning. Everybody understands and everybody's anxious to get to the zoning. We as staff understand that. And part of the process though, is before we get to that zoning conversation, which is coming soon, early next year, I'll talk more about the timeline here in a little bit. We as the SAC and Region 4 staff are working to create recommendations specific to the region plan, to the Region 4. And these recommendations are not only going to guide the plan, but hopefully also guide the conversations you all will be having related to the zoning process and the zoning applications that come in from landowners and other people, or sorry, from the landowners are going to have the application, but any other recommendations regarding zoning will be a discussion amongst us as the SAC, or you guys as the SAC. So these recommendations that we create from housing, transportation, any economic, public facilities, all these topics we've heard, we're going to create recommendations to help guide these zoning conversations. So is there any questions on that? I know that was kind of a little broad, a little vague. Correct. So yes. So tonight specifically, Jesse's gonna facilitate a housing conversation with you all, and we're gonna kind of have a feedback of here's what we as county staff has heard from you all, from the public, as well as the other professionals that we've heard. And we are aiming to form and shape and create recommendations that in January and early February you all will be voting on or having a consensus discussion on. And so in the month of December, there will be no meeting. It'll be a little bit an end of the year gift to you all, I guess we could say. That staff will be working on finalizing draft languages and draft recommendations based on all that input from professionals, the public, and you all. And then in early January and potentially early February, we'll have these conversations about those recommendations. And then we will move on to comprehensive rezoning, land use, and the meat of that. So yeah, I think that kind of covers the timeline for the next couple months. And next month, we are going to be talking about visioning, and we will get a little bit into the comprehensive zoning and just kind of give a little bit more of an outline of what to expect from that. As you all know, the the visioning survey is currently live. It ends November 1st. So please make sure your friends, your community groups, your outreach efforts are aware of that visioning questionnaire right now, because that's gonna be very helpful to help guide those recommendations as well. Now, for tonight, as I've mentioned a couple times already, it's gonna be a housing conversation, a transportation conversation. And we're just gonna be here kind of listening, helping guide this conversation and seeing what recommendations you guys come up with, right? But we understand there's been a lot of different conversations I've had already. And there's been a lot of different topics that have been discussed. And there's some new faces to the crowd, right? And one thing we want to do to have a little bit of an icebreaker just for a couple minutes. I know everybody hates icebreakers. I get it. But well, thank you, Ann. I appreciate that. We have a little thing just for everybody to kind of get up, talk to one another, maybe have a conversation with somebody you haven't had before. It's called Give One, Get One. It's where we're going to have each of you kind of just get up to talk to somebody and give something you remember or something that you really have a strong feeling for of what a recommendation should be, or something that really stuck to you throughout the entire process. Maybe there's a piece of information that was addressed in a presentation that you're like, oh, I can't live. That's amazing. That's like the holy grail of planning, right? So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask each of you to get up for just 5 minutes or so, and get up, walk around, talk to people, and let's do there. But just get to know one another a little bit more, and get that ball rolling, have some conversation going. And what we're going to do here is I'll go to Ann, and I'll tell her, I think that one really strong recommendation that I would really like to see is I want my sidewalk network completed in my neighborhood. And then Ann would tell me something in return. And then what we would do, Ann would go to somebody new and say something different. And I would go to Tom and say something different. And the idea is just to kind of get a bunch of different ideas on paper and really kind of just see what kind of helps stimulate your mind and provoke more conversation and remember maybe more things that you may have forgotten through this process. So does anybody have any questions on this? No, Ann just wasted one. So so if you guys just want to take about 5 minutes, just kind of get up for a minute and talk to people, and we will go from there. We'll reconvene at 6:20. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, good.
Thought it was important that I was fashionably on my first night.
There you go. We actually just so no worries.
Okay.
Don't know anybody. Some other people see you guys. Maybe some phone minutes. Yeah. When I get done or you get up there, I'm gonna come back, keep plug yours in real quick, and then I'm gonna unplug this. Like while I'm switching back, start to plug yours in. Switch it to the jam board on the thing, and then by that time I'll hopefully have it. Yeah, does it make sense? Okay.
Oh, I'm good. Here. Thank you. I need my eyeball. Completely. Your side.
Our library.
You never have. I don't think it's like. Hi.
Sorry. Oh, you're right on.
Yes. That's what I was thinking.
Sure. I'm gonna introduce Amy.
Yeah, I
Well, maybe the. Size that of new areas. Here. Right here. I like that. Well, I did economy. Managing all the patients.
All right. All right. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Now if everybody can kind of get back to their seat, we can kind of get it a little rolling.
Do you have another agenda?
No worries, no worries. First time I did it, I only got 3. It's easy to get caught up.
See, they're moving along. Running trail by the way. Oh, it's only.
All right, before we start doing sharing time, we have our other new member who joined us, Amy. Amy, if you just want to say a couple words about yourself, who you are.
Amy Bell, I live in River Beach, Pasadena. The background is transportation, traffic engineering. No studies, sorry, I don't have any information on that. I'm more on the design end. Signing signals, roadway lighting. But I now work where I was at State Highway, I now am at Harford County DPW. And so I get a lot of boots on the ground conversations with people. So it's an interesting from congestion with the state to congestion, but we still want this. So. And don't call me for speed humps, please.
Thank you, Amy. Steve?
Eric, I'm sorry, you may have said it and I just missed it. How was it that we acquired new members? Because I think it's great that we've expanded membership for 2 new classifications.
Sure. So we had, as you all know, resolutions passed last November 1st that got you 13 of you all on here. We actually had all 15, but 2 of the members, 1 member never showed up to a single meeting. Another member only showed up to 3 meetings. And we had 5 supervisors as well as administration do best to move forward with potential replacements. So we put the people who just barely missed the cut the first time around, and they're here. And I'm glad to say you guys have already surpassed attendance of 1 person. So thank you. And I hope we're all here to help you guys get caught up as much as you can. If you have any questions, this is a great group to work with. It makes my job a heck of a lot easier. So thank each and every single one of you. But feel free to ask me questions you'd like. So as we get going here now, with this, get one, get one, did anybody have to get all 5? Because that would be amazing, because the first time I did this, I only got 3. And it's really, we try to use it as a way to just help get the brainstorming rolling and really make sure, conversation flows as much as possible. So is there anybody that would like to share one thing that they said first, and then you can kind of go from there? If not, I will gladly call on you. I know we have 2 new people dying to share.
I only got one. It was, the comment was specifically that OEM was very prepared at a community meeting that they were at, but it was the fact that they were prepared enough that they had answers for questions that people were asking. And they came very prepared and knew their background. Information very good, instead of going, oh, yeah, get back to the technical, get back here. To being prepared for me. Good stuff.
Who told you that, or was it you?
Don't know names yet.
No worries.
Oh,
Emma. Well, Emma, do you
Emma.
have, do you have one that you'd like to share?
Reorganization. And we could
Lori, do you have one you'd like to share?
Well, yeah, I spoke with, I will, but, in talking to Emma, I know there's folks that don't know about, these are disaster, or different parents, and, it's just like, that, you know, folks have. I was thinking, you know, just some people are, information on whether emergency management occur. Have a plan.
Yo, so the microphone, we have it in the middle, and it's gonna be a little more difficult to hear, as I mentioned earlier. But again, today's meeting is gonna be, it's more of a focus for you all to work together. And so it may be more difficult for people online to hear, but again, we're not gonna pass the mic around. Perfect. Perfect. Okay, great. So since Michael happened to point that out to me, Michael, do you have anything you'd like to share?
It was a new concept. Barn mentioned 3rd places, which are having, you know, additional places to go. School, the concept of 3rd place that
Laura?
So, yeah, it's home and then like school or work, whatever you're supposed to be. Not doing. And, been brought up on the forest. And actually requiring forestation and part of land management. So, I think the burden is the
And then to wrap it up, Steve, one more share.
Yeah, Kevin and I were just talking there at the end about EDU connection. What is available for future development in terms of connection of water, public water, you know, to new developments, as well as already what exists right here, particularly when we're sharing water from the Arundel station up to areas up in the Bassett. So just as somebody taking that as part of.
And I have one. Absolutely, Tom, go ahead.
Bo is the one that mentioned this, but I think it speaks to development and older communities, how that gets handled, because there's a lot of times very limited space, and yet things get shoved in there, and maybe that shouldn't be happening.
Sure, yeah. So all these points you guys made are very good points, and this is something I want you guys to kind of grasp, hold on to as we move forward with this recommendation process. Up till now, I understand what kind of the meeting's been. Very, they have tried to be very educational, informative, and we've done our best to really make sure there's breakout sessions and to help get information from you, but into the file. But now the goal is to really get to the beat of the plan, right? We're not the zoning meat. We gotta have the appetizer first, right? So we gotta create these recommendations. And tonight, as well as in November, really want to hear all these ideas from you that we haven't heard yet, or maybe even if we have heard them, please tell us again, because this is what the plan is about. This is what the plan is about. So with that, I want to have Jesse up here. We're going to talk about the housing aspects. And if you guys notice, in a break time, take a look around the room. We have the housing maps that we worked on at the housing meeting, just to kind of maybe refresh your mind a little bit, as well as some different transportation maps as well over here. And tonight, again, is ideally going to be very casual. So if you want to get up, kind of look around the room while we're having conversations, feel free to do so. But I would just please respect one another and make sure if you're not making too much. So without any more, Jesse.
So I hope everybody came here to talk, because y'all know I'm quiet, so if no one says anything, we will stand here in silence. But other than that, switch the screen. So, like Eric said, up until now, we spent a lot of the time learning. We've been getting all these presentations, and so you can remember back in July, we had our presentation on housing. But in the meantime, I'm sure all of you guys have been talking to your members, friends, exchanging information with them, and we've been doing the same thing. We've been going out to community meetings, we've been doing surveys, we've been talking to people. And so up on the board, if I could figure out how to make it bigger for you, I would. But we've learned about some challenges and opportunities for our region.
5 bathroom, 3 bath place. So you need duplexes, you need townhouses of an affordable nature in this area. If it was 300,000, you would consider that affordable versus the 450 starting price that many split foyers are now going for in communities like Cape St. Clair and Arnold or Old Smyrna Park that were built in the 70s. You know, for a 4-bedroom, 2-bath place to start at 450 for 1,600 square feet, you can argue, you know, here we were in one of the highest income state in the country, so you can argue that it's affordable, but you know, not to the entire population. I think that's a stepping stone sort of concept. Most people in their 20s and 30s want to buy a place, sell it, use that equity to buy the next place, and then, you know, maybe get to their retirement home when they, you know, figure out if they're downsizing or housing their children or wherever it's going to be in today's society. But that's that stepping stone concept. But I think you have to have that mix in the area, because one of the things that makes Severna Park, Broadneck area so unique, I think, is how many people graduate from here and return here to raise their families, right? And you can't do that if you don't have a place for them to return to. And it's that sort of cultural turnover of, you know, hey, look, excellent schools, low crime, these different things that you want, but you want the people to be able to return to it, and not just when they're 50 years old looking for, you know, when their children are out of schools and all. You want them to come back when they're 25 and starting families, so that you can have that repeat return, because there's obviously within 30 miles a ton of jobs between Baltimore, Washington, and the entire corridor. So that's the idea. But I personally, I was going to say, speak is, I think R10 is the one. So 10 homes per acre often is where you find townhouses and or zoning. The community that's here on the Broadneck that probably has the most Canterbury is one, but the duplexes and single family is Rebel Downs, was a community built in the 70s. It was the old racetrack there. And that has, one side is almost all duplexes, the other side is single families, but they are mixed in over there. There's probably 400 to 500 homes in there when you look at it entire. But I think R10 probably has the most use, that if they were to adapt the rules rather than create another zoning class and affects protecting R1, R2, which are the larger lots with single family, you could probably create better mixed development within there if they tweak the codes to allow multiple types of housing in the same development, which seems to be a struggle for most developers. And I think when we were listening to the developers, they'd prefer actually to build one type, but it's not cost effective when you have to build them apart from each other. So getting groups of 2 or 3, the triplex, the duplex, or the multiplex with the ones above it that look like a carriage house, like you see in Florida and places like that, where they build them on bottom and top, and it looks like a standard home, but they're actually 4 units. That would also take care of most of the federal mandates the Obama administration handed out in 2016 to allow for multi-use housing and all. And R10, to me, in studying the code over time, would be one of the best places. But somebody like Kevin, who may in the industry, or somebody else might have a better guess on that.
Someone else hasn't gone, if they want to go.
I just had a question. Maybe this falls under something else. Maybe it comes under some of the categories already. But what about, where does affordable senior housing fall into this?
We can discuss that.
Well, that's
Yeah, you know, when I just take a look around the area that I live in, and I happen to live in one of those big single family, 35 single family homes of different sizes within those 35, and then also 75 townhomes. And I've actually seen, in fact, just last week, one of our townhouse owners moved into single family homes. So there's been a lot of you know, movement in that direction, and also to include neighbors who live in townhouses and other developments. The one nice thing about when you take a look at the area that I live in is that we've also got a tower, College Parkway Place, that's right behind us, that started off as senior housing, and now it's family affordable housing. And then we've got lots of townhouses, but we're sandwiched in between 2 shopping centers, Baydale and also Cape St. Clair. Now we're connected with the Broadneck Trail, both phase 1 and phase 2. And so it's really cool because other than the lack of public transportation, we've got parks, we've got schools that really are within walking distance. And really all kinds of things that you imagine that you might like to have with development, to include a variety of different homes, because say Claire, when were those built back in the 60s? Or
Starting 49, but yeah,
49.
the building boom is 67.
Yeah. So so my issue is when I take a look at what might be possible with perfect examples and stuff, it comes down to me as a matter of capacity. That when I just go down through the checklist and I say, okay, so how many water hookups are available? How many kids could go to the schools in that area? How much more traffic can we put onto the highways? Is there enough recreation for people that would come there in terms of parks and those other things? The library here, how many more people can it take? The police and emergency response for fire and medical. I mean, nobody can tell me what the capacity is here within this area before we even talk about zoning and everything for more people to come into this area of our county.
Nice segue, thank you. When I read Oman and 2040, but I did find one big glaring deficiency of the general development plan. It does not talk about what our rate of growth should be. The only place it touches on it is in the appendix, which is not a policy document, it's just background. And that's where the 0.7% comes from in gross. But it does also say within a couple of paragraphs that we have enough zoning in place right now, countywide, that we can handle that 0.7% growth for at least a year. But building on your point, what's the end game? And driving down here, I came by phase 2 or phase 3 of Broad Neck Trail. And the first time I saw phase 1, which is now built, I said, my God, they put an interstate in. But you have that bike trail. Did anybody notice that? All the trees are gone.
Pretty
You know,
wide.
it's pretty wide for a bike trail, I thought. But how are we going to use the land? And what's the end game? Are we going to continue the growth? Do we want to continue the growth 0.7%? And I also buy into the thought that I always wanted my kids to be able to live here. One thing was in part of the other one to Greenville. And I don't know what the answer is. It's just a conundrum about how you balance affordable housing with growth rate. If you slow the growth rate, the price of housing goes up. Simple supply and demand.
I don't understand is if there's such a big number that of people who want affordable housing or subsidized housing, which there are, that's a big demand. Where is the response? I know bigger developers are not going to change their methods. They don't have to find smaller developers, but we have all this demand.
Not incentivized. You need a tax plan in order to get it done.
Yeah, but
Requires a tax plan, whether it's a discount on connections.
the one that's good for subsidized housing, where they get 30 million tax.
Those policies just came about and you'll start to see it. It takes 5 to 7 years to get them off the ground, but now that there's those credits available, people are going to start building. It's coming.
That's pretty expensive. I just think that how much can you do that? I don't know.
On that note, real quick too, as a planning perspective, there are a lot of municipalities throughout the nation that offer different types of incentives. We all know tax benefits and everything like this, but there's a lot of areas in the country that if there's a development, because at the end of the day, developers, there's a business. They need to make money to continue on. We all get that. Now, some companies or some cities allow for companies and developers to come in and allow for if they designate an X% affordable workforce, whatever, they will get Y% market rate units extra on density bonuses, essentially.
Right.
So, and that's something that we
Inclusionary zoning don't have, but I think that would really help.
So that's something I think that should be discussed here too, to see what, to get your guys' opinion on that kind of stuff. Because that is something, as we all know, I think everyone understands affordability is an issue, but how do we go about it without hurting the community character and everyone's normal way of life, right? Because we want to make sure we continue to live at the highest quality of life possible, but still provide these certain aspects. So again, one thing is to incentivizing developers. So I think, and I'll go back to the SAC, but that's something that we've talked with certain agencies and developers about. I think it's something that's important that you as the SAC discuss as well.
Well, we were told, 10 years ago when we did the other, we built out. And now we've been told we're built out. And so it's odd that if we're built out, but I like inclusionary zoning, but it usually has to come with, 40, 50 units. And then we have percentage that don't look any different from the outside, but they're much lower. Montgomery County's had it for 30 years. We talked about it, but we weren't able to.
Can you go ahead, Tom?
Well, you had mentioned something that maybe, I guess, 10 houses per acre is.
Our 10 units per
is a
acre,
reasonably desirable thing for
mixing development,
mixing, okay.
in my opinion.
Yeah, I understand. I guess my question there is, given the circumstances of our region right now, still, what would be the cost of one of those homes if someone, the developer was ready to build them?
Well, problem that I know most developers have is they're small tracts of land.
Yeah.
They're hard to piece together. So it makes the cost really high when you can only get 10 units into something, and you have the cost of sewer connection and water connection costing, as we saw statistically, like 25 to 30% of a home cost is just our connection fees here. So the larger tracts of lands aren't there. So you're going to have to mix these things up in these areas.
And it's hard for a developer to look at that and say, this is
That
worthwhile for me
it's
to
not
do.
affordable.
Right.
It's not profitable.
Right, so,
You know what we're doing already? It's cluster development. I just have to say, because I have a client who is going to be next to this cluster development that's 4.4 acres with 20 single family homes. And
R5, right? It's an R5.
R5, you never get 20 on R5. I mean, you never can get as many as it sounds like.
I understand that because roads and all count into those numbers.
Yeah.
But that's why,
If you want to develop close together and smaller,
Yeah.
you don't have more units than you would get if you did it traditional. Because I think
one of the things they could do to change that is to increase the minimum size lot from 7,000 square feet to 9,000 square feet, or
we've been trying.
10. So,
Or come up with minimum size cluster,
correct. Yeah. So they don't reduce them down to 5,000, but the house is 4,000.
or 3,000.
3,000, right. So,
There's a real problem there because we were trying to get an acreage of 10,000 acres, 10,000
Square feet.
acres for cluster.
okay.
And we couldn't get that, and we lost it by one vote. And it was because a lot of people wanted 4 and wanted no limit. And what I'm seeing now is, I can't believe it. But that's what I think is this panic about affordable housing is gonna change things.
One thing I remember us discussing in the housing group in July was like restructuring already existing places and just making them, putting housing there. And the candidate I'm thinking in my head that I think would be great is the Kohl's parking lot next to the Giant on Ritchie Highway, because I've lived here for most of my life. I don't believe I've ever seen more than 2 cars parked in what's set for between 30 and 50 cars. And we discussed in that group also maybe it might be beneficial we would have a housing unit there. It's right next to the shops. They're right within walking distance. It's closer to schools as well. So just looking at different spaces like that, I think might be beneficial.
I
But
think it's brilliant, and I think when I look at the malls, and I think why couldn't they be redeveloped with certain types of housing? If we can look at places that have already been developed. But I know.
Yeah, but did you say where the Giant is or where Station Mall is.
where the Giant is, but Marley
Right,
Station.
Marley Station's even
Yeah,
bigger.
yeah,
Yeah.
also,
And I
yeah,
know
I
the
agree.
county executive is aware of that he has medical developers to do with that property, but there's a problematic development. There's actually 4 major owners to that mall.
And just
Yeah.
for context regarding the zoning, vacant, well, not vacant, but underutilized parking lots. Townhomes are only allowed in C1 and C3, but they're not allowed in C2 zone. So any parcel you see in the region that has a C2 can't have a townhome use be placed on that
We
lot.
can have townhouses in R15 and R10.
Yes, but no, the difference between some of the available and some of the commercial lots are a little more consolidated, maybe larger width
You could get rezoning.
for.
Yeah, you just go right on the line.
Yes, yes, but in terms of, making it easier without adding another step to the process, it would be you could do something where certain zoning districts that currently do not have the possibility to provide for housing uses, they could be, integrated with that. Another thing I was looking at is a multifamily, for example, on C1, C2, and C3 districts requires that a hard 25% in the C1 or a hard 50% in C2 or C3 districts be GFA of commercial use. So you pretty much would have to split up a development 50-50
You
in
just
coastal
had a
areas.
bill change the zoning for mixed use up there, at Fort Meade. It made it all housing and you didn't have to meet any of those percentages. And some people don't know if that's a good idea or bad, but I mean, I think zoning will change.
Just clarify one thing for me, that is there a substantial opportunity for rezoning within the next 6 months to a year? Or is that already pretty well set in stone?
I don't think it's set in stone at all.
That's the question.
What's the comprehensive rezoning process?
The applications are in as far as I.
No, so the comprehensive zoning is gonna kick off early next year. And there are gonna be opportunities for business or for landowners, to submit applications to, get a new zoning designation. As well as there will be different areas of the county that, will be examined by the SAC, to, see if certain areas are better suited for what type of zoning. And those conversations, those details will be coming up soon. But so yes, there's an opportunity, but we are still in that process of getting that to you guys. And one thing too, before we continue, I think this is a great conversation going on. We have about 45 minutes left tonight. We can do one of two things. We can either transition, take a quick break and transition to transportation, or we can continue to have a discussion. And the next meeting, we can discuss transportation and vision, whatever you guys would like to.
I have a question about that. I know other people have comments on that, but just about that process. So if this is going to be our recommendations, I am not entirely comfortable putting my name on something that has some of these ideas on it.
This looks like brainstorming.
Not voting.
All right, that's all I needed. I think-
But if you have different opinions, please let's have this conversation, because this is what you guys say tonight. We're gonna go back tomorrow and start drafting recommendations based on this conversation, that conversation, this conversation, feedback maps, visioning surveys, everything we've heard. Where this is an opportunity for us to really try to be our best professional planning staff, to understand what you guys are trying to tell us. If you guys don't tell us anything, we can't take that information. So we need everybody to speak up and help with it. So back to the point though, Anne, what would you? how
Well,
would you-
no, I mean, what would you, the group like to do? You want to keep going with this or go to?
Yes.
It is pretty darn important.
So then next month,
Seems
so
like
I
there's
understand,
several months to-
so next month, we will plan to talk about visioning and the transportation. Perfect, okay, and then I'll go right back. And so if you want to break, I guess just kind of leave as please, but then if not, let's continue on.
You got a question?
I have a comment, just general. into the conversation. Throughout this whole process, I mean, a couple of things stick out. I think one talked about the environment, wanted to save it. We talked about traffic going across the Bay Bridge. Talk about density and maintaining our existing communities and how those two things conflict and how do we solve that issue. So I think a couple of things. One, we haven't really talked about demand, and I would look to OPZ in the room. Where we have kind of like, it's easy to find in the appendix that there's 14,000 units available for the current zoning, but what is the demand over 20 years? We know what our current growth rate is, but I would challenge if that number is handy. I know it's in there and I've looked it up before, but
There's information like that.
there is. So, I mean, demand is kind of important, I think, to frame where we're going with this plan 2040 over the next 20 years. Another interesting thing to think about is if you look in the appendix, it talks about the growth rate from the 1970s to the 2010s, and it was, let me see, find that. The growth rate, I mean, basically the job growth rate in this county has far outpaced the growth rate of population. So what that means is we are importing people to work in this county, which creates traffic. It was interesting that Laura, you said you work across in Graysonville. So I found I mean, it's odd to find someone who lives in this county and works on the other side of the bridge. It's usually the other side of the bridge that's working at Fort Meade or commuting to DC. John, you talked about Baltimore. The reality is Baltimore is exporting jobs. I mean, COVID just totally shut down, the Inner Harbor area and that whole downtown Baltimore area, exporting jobs to homes, So I think all of those things kind of relate to, we are one region, and how do we as a region identify areas that we can help the county as a greater whole, both preserve the environment, prevent sprawl to the ability we can. If we want to preserve some single family zoning, we do, but how do we increase density in areas that have underlies, parking lots and things of that nature, or redevelop commercial areas to increase our density, limit traffic, and it all feeds together. So I think it's kind of flipping the normal model up on its head and looking at how we identify, again, those areas in our region that we can help the county as a whole. One thing we haven't really talked about is schools. I mean, if you look at the schools in this region are closed for the most part. You can't develop a normal neighborhood and not be on a school waiting list for X number of years. And then, and nobody really likes that system anyway, developer or the public. So there's 10,000 empty seats in the school system. How do we wrangle that? We talk about, class differences throughout the county, and it's very simple to look at the open and closed school map and see, it correlates very quickly. So just a lot of things to throw out there. And I think in general, we should try and, my thought is try and identify those areas that can help.
So Kevin, I'm calling you, putting you on the spot to make a point.
Yeah.
Where in your opinion, where do you see areas of opportunity? This is what I'll call them areas of opportunity. Where do you see, in your opinion, in Region 4?
In Region 4? I mean, Region 4 is infill. I mean, it's infill, and then we'd have to look at commercial areas where I think it would probably be creating flexible zoning, because it's hard to, step forward 10 years and put yourself in the shoes of a developer and say, if I'm a developer and, conditions are perfect for this type of development, this is going to happen. I mean, you have to create flexibility to allow things to occur, because the market's going to change and market demand is going to create the development at the end of the day. Especially if we're not going to subsidize it or create those incentives ourselves, which you can also do and we can make recommendations for. But I think in our commercial zone, you create flexibility for mixed use for residential to whatever possible. I mean, maybe I'm not, but it's kind of my thought. I don't know that you can identify exact areas in the region. I mean, we all know Route 2 is where your transportation is. So that's obviously where you want your major development to be, but you still have other areas that are still residentially zoned outside of that corridor.
May I put Eric on the spot for a minute? obviously, there are 3 regions committees like this in process, and you have 6 more to come over the next, I don't know, 2 years?
9 years.
How many?
Decades. 3 for 3 years, and 3 and then 3.
All right. Well, in any case, that's a long way out. And who is it that really looks at those as a combined county and says, you know, this is good for here and this is good for there. And it's, you know, it's not good somewhere. Who's doing that with you?
So essentially what Comp Plan 2040 was, right? That's what the land use conversation. Land use plan 2040 kind of land the road map for the county. And zoning was coming into through the region plans, the SAC process. So the groundwork, figuratively, almost literally, was done through Plan 2040. Now to get a little more specific within the specific communities, that's where each region has the committee of 15 people, 9 to 15 people. And this is where we have these conversations where we listen to you, talk about zoning and these recommendations, and then we come back, draft up a plan, hopefully present it to you all. You guys get consensus on it. You give the PAB, county council, and then it's enacted and then zoning gets adopted. So that's
Sorry, I don't like that answer. It just sounds to me like there's a gap somewhere that doesn't look at the whole. And it's important that the whole, for me anyway, I think some of the whole is important for us to be talking about right now. So anyway, just
Legally.
SAC is supposedly play that role, right? It's overall,
yeah.
and then we went back down to the bottom now. Right?
My concern is
The county council pass resolutions saying that this is a binding document.
Right.
All of it's just recommendations that can only
Right.
be looked at that way. It's not a binding agreement to look at the whole at any given time. And it depends on each who's elected every 4 years to decide that.
And that's fine. I just thought, why are we here then?
I still feel like we're flying blind because I think schools is a major part. We got a 15-minute presentation by schools with no Q&A. I was on Zoom, I could barely hear it, and there were like 5 other presenters of different things too. And schools is so at the heart of so much of this. I feel like I know I don't feel like I'm equipped to make some decisions about housing until I hear like something that I need one of these dedicated to schools. I need a robust presentation about schools, not a 15-minute, hey, see ya, bye. That was not okay for me.
Well, anyway, if anybody has any questions for any presenter or any department, let us know. We will give you the information as soon as we can. Just you ask us the questions, we'll pass it on.
Are you asking about building construction or the curriculum?
I'm asking about how it affects housing. That's what I want to know. It's the education, how crowded our schools are, and how it directly affects housing.
To Kevin's point, there's 10,000 open seats. They're just not allocated correctly. They need to redraft it all. And we are losing funding per person, per student, per teacher by not having people in the right schools. At some point, we all have to suck up our egos and shift south and west because that's where the population went and that's where the schools need to be adjusted. South River gave up people to form Arundel, right? You're going to have to move people from Annapolis into South River. You're going to have to move Severna Park West when they open two of those schools over in Old Mill. They're going to have to move north and west. You're going to have to draw Broadneck kids in Maga Vista back to Severna Park. You're going to have to drag it that way. And that's where the population has changed. No one's willing to do that. At some point, the school board will have to decide that. Until then, you probably can't have that discussion about housing.
I think it's.
They also have 51% of the budget and they decided all without the approval of the county anyway.
Some counties really redistrict fairly regularly and it's not such a big deal, but we haven't. And,
Haven't in years, they said.
you know,
Yeah.
and there's, I mean, I know that even Ziegler continues to be concerned about the 10,000 seats that we're basically paying for, but nobody's there.
That's
So I
buildings
think
and.
You're gonna try to do redistricting.
It's never happened before, right?
The piecemeal work doesn't work, just like when they try to do Broadneck Elementary in Cape St. Clair. To switch 100 students to get one from 110% down to 100 and one from 8% to 9. And It was an infight and never happened. You can't do it without looking at every school and move everybody at the same time and piss everybody off at the same time and just take the hit to collectively. It's the only way they can effectively do it.
I think we would call it a presentation they did for this committee, that the Chesapeake system
Right.
is maybe
65 to 70%.
and
So you're gonna pull kids from Severna Park and move them there. You're gonna pull them down from Glen Burnie and move them there.
Except that this is why I want the school in, because there are magnet programs and there are these other programs that could live in Chesapeake where people would want to go, because right now the population isn't dense enough for Chesapeake High School. But if they could have, if there were magnet programs there that people really want to go to and apply for, you could fill those seats that way, which is what I mean. But those are just the ideas I have. I don't know the exact like implications and all that stuff and what it would take to do that, which is why I feel like we did not get a good enough presentation from schools. Like I still have so many questions and I feel like so much we could learn so much.
The magnet seats are so limited, and even now Cat North, which didn't used to be quite as in demand. My daughter's interested in it for next year. And some years they can do the 2 semesters for 9th grade exploratory. They're only able to do 1 now because they said they're going to have to go to lottery just like the other magnet schools now, because
And that's what I'm trying to do. I live
Well,
in
Pasadena, this is what I'm saving up for transportation. There's just an access problem.
Yep.
But I mean, for magnets, the first problem is there are not enough seats. So I don't know anything about how to, from the school's perspective or whatever. Pardon?
I'd say actually reconstructed. They're building a new Cat North.
Yeah, well, and my kid will miss it, but yeah, they said 4 or 5 years. But yeah, there's not a lot of seats. And then the other thing is the buses. So my son goes to a magnet, and we didn't know until the day before school started if he would have a bus or if he could walk to the bus, because they used to go to what was George Fox and pick up the kids, and then they stopped doing it, and then they started doing it again. But the one bus was set up to go to Severna Park, down to Chesapeake, come up through Pasadena, and then go to Old Mill or something. It was like an hour and a half or something. They had it routed all very strangely, and then they changed it. But what I'm saying is I think it's great, but I just think there's so many other issues with getting in and out of there, and the buses and but I mean, I'm not opposed to it. It's just-
Are there any areas that, or you can think of besides parking lots that are ripe for revitalization or renovation?
Pasadena, north of the Stony Creek Bridge. Which is it's a odd area to begin with because it has a Baltimore zip code and it messes with people's car insurance rates and everything else. So part of it is people don't want to live there because of that. You have a lot of houses out towards the water, but that main stretch through there, it's a lot of older buildings. There's some businesses, but some of the buildings are empty. And, I'm assuming that those are buildings that have been there since it was more of a summer community. But you have 4 lanes there at that point. So you're looking at from the Stony Creek up to the Beltway is just under 4 miles. So if you take those buildings and you create apartment or senior housing, you're not that far from the grocery store, the post office, the library, that type of thing, but you're not imposing on schools, but it sounds like right now we're okay on the north end.
You get retailers that they can't even get another grocery store in there. And then they have a small independent one. I mean, people aren't gonna-
Well, that's why I'm saying more housing, as opposed to new housing on new lots and cutting down trees and that type of thing is use the land that's already.
Yeah.
Parking lot's impervious, so if you put a building on it, it's still impervious.
I think that's a great idea. I know that in District 1, Alison Picard is doing, he's gotten tremendous changes in what builders can do if they're revitalizing or renewing up there. I mean, they don't have to follow the school APF. It's really kind of a model program.
My daughter I'm giving away my age here, but my daughter is in her mid-30s and she has moved back home and she works down in Annapolis and she can't find affordable rent for a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment. So she's moved back home. And so, but she's not the only one. And I mean, I have friends that have their kids and their grandkids living in their basement because they don't, it's between being laid off and changing jobs, but it's also the market. There's not enough rentals. And there's nothing wrong with rentals. That's where I started and here I am, and I've got a house in a neighborhood. But I think there's something more and the further you go out, at least in my opinion, the further you go out more towards the edges of the water, you do have more room between the houses and they're very old lots. So they're already pre-established. But where I'm at in Rivera Beach, it's like half duplexes, half original homes. And everything on the shoreline is a mixed match of everything from the old cottages to people who've torn them down and built the big stuff. We have county water and sewer. However, it's interesting because I think somebody mentioned in one of it, we have city water. Our water doesn't come from down this end. Our water comes from Baltimore City.
Yeah, that's just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's all from this county now.
Oh, it is from county. Okay, well, I don't remember seeing that, but okay.
Yeah, understood.
Does that include on the other side of Stony Creek?
The entire county is
Okay.
county sufficient.
We were told when we were in your house, flip the pipe from your septic, you're gonna put another one toward the plan to put in sewers. And it's a waterfront community, although we just live on the water. 5 years later, we still have septic. And that's an issue too about.
Yeah, we're sewer over there. We're on the sewer system up there. But I just see places where, I mean, you look at, and just to give an example of a revitalization and my dad lives with me right now and we've been looking for places for him for senior apartments and my sister's in Carroll County. And there was a company that came in and just completely rehabbed an old school and they turned it into a senior apartments and it's amazing. And I think about St. Jane Francis is just sitting there and, I don't know if at one time, some of the nuns were still living there, but I don't know. I mean, there's a building sitting there that could be purposed into a community center or there is another school in there.
My daughter went there.
Part of the Catholic school system?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
It's a Catholic school, but it's more actually teach logic if you can do that. every kid has a thing. My granddaughter has I'm trying to remember the name of it.
And I know there's places in Glen Burnie too. I guess you look at the mall, Glen Burnie, I mean, there's hardly anything there and they've got lots of land. I guess the thing is, where can we take and use the land that we've already messed up?
That's the best thing to figure that out.
The question I have is, but you mentioned north of Stony Creek is not in our region. So.
What region are they in?
Region 1.
Glen Burnie. Curtis Creek. It's Curtis Creek zip code,
That's why
Okay.
It just seems to me that
Where's that?
maybe we can have more flexibility to either recommendations to other committees.
Are they the ones that are meeting now too?
No, it's points.
Okay.
Allison Pickard, that's her.
On Tom's note, one thing that we've discussed in steps, I think it is, and being so close to Molly Station Mall, right? Like it's a hub. And regardless of what's going to be happening there in the next year, 5, 10, 15, 30, however many years, it's going to affect Region 4, right? So I think one thing that this SAC can do is provide your ideas and input for the surrounding abutting regions. So now I'm not saying plan Glen Burnie, but I am saying, if there's something that abuts Region 4, I think it's worth it. This SAC discuss it, and have that kind of maybe in the plan and say, if this region continues to work like this, or maybe they incorporate these ideas or something like that. But definitely, it's definitely worth discussing and noting your neighbor, right? Because you don't want to live next to the frat house when you have 2 kids, right? So it's good to discuss.
That's, to me, it's classic, not in my backyard, and I'm on
Right.
board, I agree. I'm just saying, be prepared for the other people saying you're messing with our territory, but we're people, we're groupish and we're territorial. That said though, is to me, my vision is, I look at the county as a whole, and we have an incredible transportation corridor between Baltimore and Annapolis. We have all kinds of highways, all kinds of rail lines, all kinds of transit. And so in the affordable housing, you made that point before, Kevin, so shouldn't the housing allow affordable housing to be in that corridor where it can have a better chance of transit-oriented development or walkable communities? And again, that's saying not in our area.
But John, I would piggyback on that. What I was trying to say earlier is, even though I was talking about capacity, is that I live in a dense neighborhood. I'm very comfortable with that. And I just visited Holland, where I lived for 3 years. And this time with a little bit more situational awareness, looking at Zoom. Very congested villages there. But the nice thing is that it's all been designed the right way. Road friction, there's bicycle paths, there is shopping that's close by. But most importantly, there's bus stations everywhere. And there's also rail lines. And gas costs to fill up a small car somewhere between $80 to $100. So
On why they have better mass transit.
That my mode of transportation to getting to Amsterdam and other places, to include going outside of Holland, was to jump on a train. And so that's why I'm opposed to more growth within the Cape St. Clair, Arundel area and stuff, because even if we adopted the kind of housing that I live in that area to make it more convenient to shopping and so forth, all those people that we got in the Economic Development Council are going to go up Route 2, or they're going to go out on 50, and they're going to go someplace else. And the traffic is going to be here every day and just greater than it is right now, because we don't have public transportation. And without that key ingredient in this area, I do in fact want to shift it to someplace that has those amenities that are essential to get people to and from work.
Remember, I made I went off on a rate, I guess, about mass transit, and people do not want to ride it.
Yeah. Well,
Here's the thing, I grew up in Baltimore City. People, when you first talk mass transit, there's a stigma, they think the big city bus and everything. Carroll County's got a great little commuter system going there. Harford County does. We have something that's kind of sort of quasi in the county. I think it's taking that and beefing it up. And then it is the smaller buses and things like that. And people go, oh, that's not too bad.
Their thoughts about transportation, because I went to a transportation meeting and a lot of us were talking about how we can make the bus more attractive and more comfortable and have better schedules and all that kind of stuff. And the people that were, the staff were telling us, we don't need that because we deal with people that have no other choice. Now that to me, I mean, no wonder you don't like the buses. Or what?
Well, I think this,
But we don't have customers.
I think
It's free. There's no ridership. It's minimal.
I can tell you North County, up where I'm at, there is, because, I was blown away. I had no idea how many people up in Pasadena area live there, work there, and they walk, and none of them drive. When the state redid the little Stony Creek drawbridge and they shut it down, the community outrage on that, first of all, State Highway screwed up because they didn't tell anybody ahead of time. That was on them. But the number of people that came out that live on one side and walk to the other, or live on one side and take their kids to daycare here, and then they walk back over here I was amazed how many people. And State Highway was forced to, at their cost, provide, it was an 8-mile detour. There's people who can't walk 8 miles to go to work. So the state was required to bring them in transportation and do that loop for them, and weekends too, because people had to get to the grocery store and things like that. And they were very well used. So I was actually surprised the usership of that for the people that are going across the bridge.
yeah. I think a lot of the issues we're currently bringing up right now all do come back to that class divide and other types of de facto segregation that is present throughout the county and the country. And I think part of that is because, and I'm gonna, all of you already know this part of it, but I'm just gonna say it for the sake of saying it. Like I mean, Kevin's absolutely right. We import jobs, and it's because everyone who lives here, they go out of the Anne Arundel County to go to cities that offer very high paying jobs. And it's sort of, this is just my opinion. I think it sort of creates this idea that we are, well, we are a wealthy county, but that means that we are exclusive to wealthy or semi-wealthy people, and that we're not as accessible to lower income folks or folks who like have no interest in going to DC every day and working a government job. They just want to own their shop, or they just want to be a cashier at the grocery store, and that's perfectly fine. We don't really have that mentality here, that at least in my opinion. So I think that all comes back to, I think when the question you asked before of how do we break down class divides, I think the key is education at the end of the day for any sort of divides. It's meeting each other where the other is and figuring that out and figuring out our differences in the community. So that's my one suggestion, but I mean, that might be above our pay grade. But yeah, I think that, and then in terms of the stigma of mass transportation, again, I mean, there are people who need the transit system here, but it's not, I don't think, the predominant set of people, because most people in this county are well enough to have cars, and then they don't work here, so they don't have to go from their house where they live here to their store that they own here. There's not really as much reason for a lot of people to be utilizing, public transit. So I think it all comes down to that perception, and breaking down that perception might be something that would help us, behoove us. And then I just want to add one thing before I give it back. I just want to recognize, because we sort of went past Holly's concern about flying blind, and I feel mostly comfortable, but I do also get a little bit uncomfortable with, I get concerned when I see multiple members all expressing like a lack of what are we doing here? Like, is there even a point to this? And I genuinely believe we do. But to that point, I would like to ask, what obligation does the county council have to accept our recommendations that we worked for years on?
Zero.
So
None. Binding doc.
Sometimes ideas that you can live with. Maybe they're not your favorite idea, but you can understand the merits of it, and you say, might not like it, but it has to happen. And so the goal of that is, and when we do go in front of county council, like you said, they don't have to say it, except that if they don't want it. But if they look at the faces of the community, you spent all your time doing this, thinking about all these things, making these concessions, an agreement, then hopefully if you guys stand up in front of them and say, this is our work, we did this, hopefully it'll help them to want to accept it.
in my experience, that really doesn't work. They will make it.
Just go that night.
I haven't gone just that night. I've gone every, and I just feel, I mean, if this is something where legislatively that it would have to be changed, I'm not going to step outside of our zone, but if there was a way that we could make the county council more beholden to listen to us, that's silly to say, but
To the fire.
yeah, hold their feet to the fire. Yeah, and it's
Supposed to be getting input from neighbors and also telling neighbors to contact county council members. I mean, I think that's part of our role, is involving our communities so that it's not just 15 people, it's our communities who are hopefully gonna help.
And that's the point. Like, who here is getting paid? Me, Jesse, and Lorenzo, right? You guys are in the worst spot. The thankless job, the free job, free labor. Like, you guys are the volunteers of this community. We understand that, and this plan's value and importance relies on what Melissa was saying. You 15 people and your outreach to the community and our staff's outreach to the community, all this combined is we are hoarding everything we do. All the survey results, all the numbers of surveys, the public outreach we go to, these meetings. And ideally, like I sent you guys at the very beginning of the process, tracking sheet, right? The outreach tracking sheet. And that we're going to use all this information to show this is what we've done. This isn't just a room of 15 people creating a plan. This isn't just a room of 3 staff members creating a plan. We've done this as a community because from day one, we've been trying to give the message across. This is no one person or one group's plan. This is the community's plan. And as everybody kind of was saying, if we all together bind as one and really show up in a force, that's what we're hopeful for. At the end of the day, the realization is county council can say no to everything. That's what could happen. And you look at Plan 2040, there's a bunch of amendments that came in, right? And it's very hard to determine what can happen when we get to that point. But if we work together as one, as best as we can only control what we can control. And one thing we can control is our effort and our responsibility to put this group together to do the best we can to get the best words on the paper as possible to present to the council. And what I've done as a career, what Jesse and Lorenzo and I do as our work and as our life's purpose is to really make sure communities are represented as best as possible, right? And that's what I devoted my life to, and that's what you guys are devoting your free time to. Like, this is a lot, and we understand that, and we just want you all to understand that at the end of the day, if we can continue to move forward together, that's the best thing we can do possible. And we have to show up together and really plead our case to show this is what the community wants, and this is what we, as Jesse pointed out, the consistency. We can live with this. This is what we believe can be the best region for today, tomorrow, and in the future.
I have a question. So if we're talking about longevity of this, what's going to happen? Like, I mean, we're talking about going to the county council, but what happens if the county executive is changed? You know, like, is this the last time meeting? Because, I mean, like, also we're during the holiday season too, like the end of the month in November, the end of the month in December is Christmas and New Year's. Like, is this potentially the last time we're meeting?
So we are proceeding as normal. Staff, we are proceeding to have our November meeting, November 28th at the Suburban Park Library. Go ahead and write that down if you want. Mention it again later, it's fine. But we are proceeding to have these continue our job, continue what's in front of us. If we get new direction after the election, then I will inform you as soon as I can. But as of this moment, I am proceeding my work. I am planning tomorrow to get ready to start finalizing, the comp zoning stuff. I'm not changing my path yet. No, it's not.
I think it gets sworn in December.
Yeah, at least got.
But we are not having a December meeting, by the way. If you.
They're not having this. Yeah.
Do we know how other jurisdictions and other states or wherever might do things differently with a committee like this, or are they always dependent upon a county council that could change every 4 years? Is there a different way that this works elsewhere?
Yeah, there's
Your form of government.
Yeah.
Every commission style.
There's 3,100 counties. Probably 30.
They ought to be done differently.
zoning is done very differently in very different areas.
I mean, Calvert County and all have a different style of government, and they do it differently than we do.
One overarching thing though is the state of Maryland has its own planning department, and there are state laws that require us to go through this general development process. So I mean, there is like some larger, so.
But when you get down to the county passing or sending bills, unless it's something really unusual, the state's not.
I don't know. The initial federal requirement, the initial planning requirement is federal legislation. And Maryland pretends that it's theirs.
Well, the only thing I was gonna say is that the one thing that changed for this time with these community plans, because regional plans are community plans, is that in the general development plan, when it was adopted in 2021, was put into it that these regional plans have to happen.
Oh, I
And
see.
this is why it's something that we have to do, and we have 9 of them. So in some way, we have to do them before 8 years are passed, and the need for the update is there. So,
So does that mean they didn't have them before? Or they weren't as formalized?
Small area, 15 or 18,
We have-
16, small area plans, and they were fully staffed departments that helped you work on it in 99. And they were Broadneck specific, for parks, for Odenton, Pasadena. They were very specific to smaller areas. And the question becomes how much, we all went through them and how much did they actually get accomplished for 20 years and for some wins and losses and,
Well, they're smaller and smaller.
It's available online.
yeah, they're in the guide that you.
Okay.
Arnold.
I just want to bring up
Broadneck.
accessory dwelling unit. Have you guys heard about accessory dwelling unit? It looks like Annapolis, did Annapolis pass it? Okay, well, this is another thing that's really capturing the community across the country is accessory dwelling unit. And it's supposed to be for like one person, maybe a couple. Maybe limit on how big it is. We're talking about garages, basements, separate buildings out in your backyard.
Granny pods would fall under that? Okay.
I'm just wondering, for my neighborhood, we have all these covenants. I guess if you're in a subdivision, you have covenants. I don't know what that'll be. Plus, we have septic.
There'll be more fights
You know,
or legal fees. Communities will need to bulk up to defend their covenants if they want to defend it.
it'd be good, but I'm just thinking that a lot of people, if they put it in their backyard, are probably gonna make it pretty nice.
I wouldn't agree with that. I wouldn't agree with that. If you can get an Airbnb in a metal tin in your backyard, there's going to be people who are going to be pulling that off.
I think that's something that needs to be a topic. So I think, and if you want to go a little more, like, what's your opinion, or maybe you don't have to tell me your opinion, but like, let's go a little bit deeper. So we can understand, us as staff can understand the SAC's opinion on ADUs.
I know from talking to people in Annapolis, they already had a tremendous number of committed. The city was small and they didn't have a lot of housing and hotels. So they checked if they did a big survey, and these weren't seeming to cause people problems. You know, it's new land and it's small and all that sort of thing. I think the county probably is not in that position, that we have so many ADUs that they're going to have an easier time. I think it's really worth getting deep into it to figure it out, whether it would definitely help people that don't have any more land.
I mean,
For small units.
people do it with a tiny house. I who was staying in somebody's yard. Their house.
I don't know, what do you guys do? In California now, or at least LA.
Yes,
You
really.
can have them
'Cause,
anywhere pretty much.
I mean, real estate and the cost, and people are doing what they can because.
Anywhere where you could see them essentially being benefit.
I think, well, one, zoning doesn't permit it. It's 2 dwellings on the spot unless the zoning's there, so it's illegal when someone does it. Correct. Well, right, you gotta change those things. I just think if you're gonna get into changing all of them, then do it comprehensively, R5s, R10s, to say where it's gonna be allowed. Is the townhouse that has a little grass thing in the backyard gonna put in a shed that someone can live in? That's what you're gonna get down to is, you want affordable housing? We'll get 6 people in this place that has 4 bedrooms because we added a bedroom in the basement and.
That's already been popular, the sheds that are just, super fancy sheds, or, your little gym back there, or with all the virtual, remote working, people were putting out.
That's different than someone living in it though, where they have to have
That's what I
room
mean.
facilities.
Know all the regulations, but I mean, there's many definitions of outbuildings and what they're,
Have a great point. So we don't currently have them, so we don't currently have like ideas or regulations behind them, but I'm hearing some. So I'm hearing we don't want them in the backyard of the townhouse. That's why that's.
I'm just saying that's an example that
There's some limits on setbacks.
Well,
Yeah.
that, like, I mean, a shed has a setback of a certain distance, of 150 square feet or smaller, you can just put one in. 150 square feet or bigger, you need to set back 7 feet off your line. You need to do, some communities say it's 10, they'll fight you on it. So you're going to get into creating legal battles for community associations and other people who want to defend the property worth that they have, that they see value. It's not, but many will take it as an advantage to obviously collect a rent on their property to help offset the cost of taxes and other things that are going up here.
Community that I told you. 20 single family homes and 4.2 acres. They have 3,000 square feet, pretty much is their lot.
Yeah,
I don't
so
think
it's crazy.
Good to have a ADU.
Whether it has to be built or if it can be a mobile unit.
Okay. Well, I think it's a good idea, because that.
It's many houses.
We think about senior housing, mom, or father-in-law suites, so they're both sort of like down the street from me.
Oh, Yeah, increases lot size.
I want to jump in with a comment. So, like, I graduated from Broad Neck High School 10 years ago, and most of my friends are still think. No one, I have one close friend that still lives in Region 4, including me. Like, I had to move elsewhere because of affordability. And it's a nice thing for my parents and our neighbors in their neighborhood that a house sold for 3.5 times more than what my parents paid for their house when they bought it in 2000. But that means it's completely unaffordable for a younger person like myself. So I'm glad that we had this conversation.
Can I ask where you
tonight.
were?
Towson.
Thousand?
Yeah,
So you had an option moving closer to childhood.
right.
Anybody else have any questions?
It needs a lot of correlations, and if they're rational, I'm not always to housing. They may not always be factual. And we talked about schools and transportation, and I think at one of the schools, yeah, who was mentioned that we're seeing population increase due to existing homes. So when you associate school capacity in housing, transportation, we talked about, and we've seen a lot more cars on the streets, 20% increase in vehicles, 10% increase in homes being built. Is that the same? We talk about folks going outside. So I think when we come up with the draft recommendations, while I think there's a easy thing, hey, let's put it on new housing, it can be, there's there are a variety of reasons we're having. Let's not make housing we pay the price for it. I think we need more housing. We need growth. We could argue about growth. I think like Walton did, you're not growing, you die. Yeah. So we got it. Yeah, this is reasonable. We don't want to overgrow. It's like what's our right pace of growth, and where do we what should it be? I don't think we should put with affordable housing in certain areas. I think that doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the folks that were going in there. We do need to spread it out. We don't want to just put affordable housing in one area. So those are my little closing comments. But I think when we come up with a recommendation, whatever they are, we should make sure they're fact-based, not just based on what we think.
On that note too, when we, as staff noted, we're going to create these recommendations, draft language. We're going to have these reviewed by not only our supervisors, but these professionals that have come to present to you, right? So it's not just going to be random things that stick to the wall and come back to you and bring it and vote. This is going to go through a vetting process, essentially. And then whatever's kind of discussed with these professionals that know this stuff and live this stuff and breathe this stuff every day, we're going to come back to you with that. So it's going to be, it's not going to be just random words thrown together. There's going to be a lot of thought put into this. And that process started with you. So we've heard a lot of stuff And we've heard a lot of good information, and now it's our job to take it and put it into, these nice strategies to put it through a, I don't know, like an oven, right? And then have it bake and grow and then come back to you when it's ready to be, it's discussed and ideally, have a consensus on one way or the other.
Are you gonna try and hang this on the GDP point of view?
What do you think?
Under here. Oh,
So the goals and policies of the Plan 2040, that's essentially what we're going on. But we're getting more specific with this region plan.
and you would find the suggested.
Essentially, yes.
Can we come up with a- Why do you, you're gonna put that in, you know?
Like, we're not gonna talk about that. We're not gonna talk necessarily about being a buyer. But we are going to talk about.
One more thing, I think today was a great test drive for how these strategies are gonna be coming together. We're gonna have, talk about the economy, healthy communities, we have many topics that we're gonna probably try to do something similar like this in the future. If you think it's useful, maybe Eric, I don't know if maybe the next time we do something like this, we could give a little more of a heads up earlier in terms of weeks regarding the topic. And if you have some questions, then you want to say, Lorenzo, if we're talking about housing, I really want to this about how schools impact housing, for example. Maybe if you tell us via email or just call us, maybe we can have some of these questions ran through our experts. We're not experts in schools, but maybe if we give a 3-week instead of a 2-week or something like that, heads up on the topic, we can have better answers for you when we're making recommendations. If that makes you more comfortable with the discussion.
Absolutely. If you guys have any questions, send them to me, Lorenzo, or Jesse, anybody, as soon as you try to think of them, and we will send them right away real quick. One of you already have, and I do my best to get back to you as fast as I can. Sometimes it gets held up for whatever reasons, but the second I get a response, I'm sending it right back. So, and there was a running list of questions asked by all SAC members in different presentations. I've saved in the Google Drive. I'll make sure it's there. And it's a good way to make sure, just maybe look it over, spark any questions you might have based on it.
For some of the new people and some of us who haven't gone here that often, the hub runs.
Yes.
Part of the reports from every, we have all of the schools.
Correct. So if you go to the aacounty.org/region4 and scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a library section. The top part of the library is general. You can find the small area plans link there. You can find the poverty study there. If you scroll a little bit farther down, you can see the presentations that were given, the PDFs versions of them. You can see the recording of the meetings, and you can also see any documentation that they have. It's all there on the hub site. Again, it's aacounty.org. Yes, meeting was
I think because we then don't need to have more data, more facts. We looking back on some of those things. Kind of one over my head.
Absolutely. So next month's meeting is the Monday after Thanksgiving, November 28th. I believe it's at the Starbuck Library. I will make sure it is mentioned correctly in email. And if you cannot attend that meeting, please let us know sooner rather than later. I know it's the holiday season. I know it's the Monday after a long weekend, but the sooner you guys let us know, the better, just so we can accommodate all that potential outcomes. Again, briefly in November or December, there will be no meeting. That's staff is going to be writing, doing a lot of work, talking to these professionals, getting these their opinions on the recommendations we create present to you in January. So, what I would recommend doing in the next couple months, going back, looking at those information, looking at those presentations, reviewing those PDFs, thinking if you have any questions you'd like. Because the meetings in early January will be very similar to tonight. But there will be essentially discussing and a consensus one way or the other on what we come up with this strategy. Yeah.
Possible to get a printout of the presentations we've been given.
Yeah, but they're all online.
They're all online. That's
They're on your, go to your website, go to your Google Drive.
I meant like. You can print them out.
You can print it.
I don't have it. Go to the
The
library.
library, we're in the
Yeah.
library, so there's a print online.
The online survey that ends on the first, what, how are you, do you know the numbers of what kind of feedback you're already getting?
I don't know, we done one every week, I'm not sure I can give you the exact numbers right now.
Right.
But yeah, we
I guess to follow that is if you think they were, I mean, like, we're just coming in from Pasadena, I get, I was thinking about sending it out to the community organizations where I'm at, but I don't know if this is enough time to give them, if they don't know about it. Is there a way to extend that date a couple weeks, or is that a hard fast for everybody?
So we are in line with the other region plans.
Okay.
We're trying to be as possible, as long as possible. We understand the zoning conversations. That's where we need to get a bit of the time. But essentially, we've given the opportunity for over a month. It's been in letters, we've sent it to ECS, their outreach team.
Oh, okay, so they're already,
Yeah.
okay.
But definitely,
Send it out. Good, just.
Yeah.
I did, and I did a very good part, training presentation and another one, so I'm gonna remind them the deadline's almost here.
Okay.
Somebody asked me, and we've got about 55 completed surveys for our regional.
And how many people live in our region?
And then I haven't done it yet.
I mean,
Anybody else done it?
120,000.
Arnold, 12 for Broadman, 10 for Cape St. Clair, 10 for Pasadena, and 15 for Sabina. We don't have any for Gibson Island. Is there anybody who's got friends in Gibson Island?
Friends of their town manager.
so I mean, there's no-
There you go.
if there's no other question for me, I just wanted to say, please, look over, we have a lot of information back to month. Please just review that, moving forward. We'll talk to you in November, but there is a motion, there doesn't be a motion.
Make a motion to adjourn.
You know where Mount Secret.
All in favor?
If you have any questions, please feel free to.
They're all.